Yes, if you read the thumbnail to this video, it's absolutely true that after nearly 40 years of backpacking and I don't know, hundreds of wild camps, for the first time on my last trip I was asked to move on. So in this video what I want to do is I'm going to really discuss that whole situation, kind of how it happened and how I dealt with it, and then also at the end kind of some reflections I've got on the current situation regarding wild camping in England and Wales, and my own thoughts about how it could be moved forward. So, the incident in question. My wife Judith and myself, we were walking the southern loop of the Shropshire Way, so that's 120 miles. We were planning to do it over 8 days, 7 nights. And when we do these sort of trips together, we kind of like to mix it up and do a bit of wild camping and stay in some bed and breakfasts as well. And that's what we plan on this particular trip. Now, whenever I'm doing something like this, I try and identify beforehand where I think some potential, wild camping spots might be, if we're going to be wild camping. And my first port of call is always to look for any areas that are open access, and try and make sure, if I can, that we're kind of using open access land rather than any arable or cultivated land. But on the Shropshire Way you're kind of quite limited in certain sections as to areas that have got open access land. But on our third night I'd kind of identified a particular spot at a place called Shropshire Hill. And you can see it on the map, open access land. It's very clear on the OS maps now. It's kind of shaded in that kind of light yellow colour. So easy to identify. So I picked Shropshire Hill out as a potential site. But without going into a lot of detail, we were late starting on our first day because the train was delayed, and it kind of put us behind a bit. So it meant that on the third day we were a couple of miles short of Shropshire Hill, and Judith was she was pretty shattered. It'd been a long day as it was. He said, "Look, Andrew," he said, I'm shattered, can we just find somewhere to stay here?" So we're on arable land, but very open land. There were no farm buildings, any dwellings anywhere around us. I said, "Yeah, I'll have a look round." There was a hedgerow beside the Shropshire Way that we were walking down, and a little open gate. And when I looked round the gate, there was a nice little level grassy part for us to camp on. There were no signs of any, or evidence of any animals there at all. It all looked fine, so we pitched the tent there. It was pretty late in the day, had some food, and we were just about really getting settled down to go to sleep when we heard the sound of a quad bike. And Judith kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, don't worry, it'll probably just drive past us." Anyway, the quad bike turned into this gate. It was a young lad who was on the quad bike, and as soon as he saw us, he kind of shook his head. So I got out of the tent, went over to him. In fairness to the young lad, he was totally polite and, as it transpired, as helpful as he could be. But he said, "Look," he said, you can't camp here." He said, "I'm bringing some pheasants up through this field in the morning." I said to him, "Look," I said, "we'll be gone. First light, tent will be down, we'll be away, you won't even know we've been here, really make sure that we don't leave any trace at all." He said, "Sorry mate," he said, "I just can't do it." He said, "If my gaffer found out," he said, "it's more trouble than it's worth to me. He's not as sympathetic as I would be." I said, "Right, okay, any suggestions then?" Because it was like, getting dark now. And in fairness, he did try to help, but his help was really just, get off my patch onto somebody else's patch, and it's their problem then. He gave us a suggestion to go to some woodland that was about a mile away, but that involved going down a track that wasn't a public right of way, and also then camping on some woodland that again was privately owned, so it just didn't seem to be a great solution. Anyway, as it turned out, I said, "Look, we'll carry on down the Shropshire Way," and we walked the extra 2 miles that evening in the dark, and climbed up Shropshire Hill, and found, as it turned out, it was quite a pretty decent spot there. So no great harm done. Judith had a chance to have a bit of a recovery anyway before we did the walk, so yeah, it was all fine and all perfectly amicable. So I think the best thing to do if you're faced with a situation like that is to be as non-confrontational as possible. you know, because, you know, technically you don't have permission to camp there. I tried to explain the situation, you know, that the fact that we were just there one night, we were going to be away first thing in the morning, and that has worked on a couple of previous occasions actually, but this was the first time I've been asked to move on, you know, and if his, you know, reason was genuine, then, you know, so be it. We've no right to be there. So yeah, I think just be as non-confrontational as you can. If you need to pitch up, move on and find somewhere else. So that incident got me really reflecting on the whole wild camping situation that exists in England and Wales, which obviously is very different to Scotland. Because in England and Wales, technically, you can't wild camp without the permission of the landowner first. I know Dartmoor's probably got a few exceptions, but that just doesn't seem to make any sense to me at all. So for example, I'm looking at the moment at backpacking the Cambrian Way, which goes, you know, right across Wales, and there are some sections of that where I don't know how you do it if you weren't wild camping. And also, if I'm going to do a trek like that over 300 miles, how do I get the permission before, and how do I know where I'm going to be at the end of each stage, at the end of each night? How do I contact the landowners anyway? You know, is there a set phone number somewhere that I haven't taken along with it? It just doesn't seem to make any sense. Would the landowners really want me ringing all the time to ask permission first? I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense. So I guess what I'd like to see as a first step would be that we have a situation on the open access land in England and Wales that's very similar to what they have in Scotland. Now I know that with those kind of extra rights come responsibility, and people will say, well, yeah, but you get people who are dirty campers who will leave a mess, and well, yeah, I guess there will be a small number who will do that. But what I'm increasingly encouraged by is, you know, go on YouTube and see the number of people there who are wild camping responsibly, and who are really getting that message out of leave no trace. So I think, you know, promoting that message is absolutely key to moving forward. And I've actually got here the open access code, sorry, the access code for Scotland. And this is what it says with regards to wild camping, and it just seems to me to be eminently sensible. So it says that access rights extend to wild camping. This type of camping is lightweight, done in small numbers and only for 2 or 3 nights in any one place. You can camp in this way wherever access rights apply, but help to avoid causing problems for local people and land managers by not camping in enclosed fields of crops or farm animals, and by keeping well away from buildings, roads or historic structures. Take extra care to avoid disturbing deer stalking or grouse shooting. If you wish to camp close to a house or building, seek the owner's permission. Leave no trace by taking away all your litter, removing all traces of your tent pitch and of any open fire, and not causing any pollution. So those guidelines just, you know, make a lot of sense, and you know, if everybody followed those guidelines, I can't see why we couldn't extend wild camping into England and Wales in those open access areas. Can't see the issue there at all. The other thing I've reflected on though as well is, having done quite a number of backpacking trips over the last couple of years, me and Judith have done quite a few. We've tried to go out and go to some different areas of the country that we've never been to before, and we found that, you know, backpacking them and walking through them, you know, you get a real, you know, different sense of the landscape, you know, and the little villages there. We found it absolutely fascinating. But one of the things we have also noticed is just the amount of land in England and also in Scotland that's given over to shooting, whether that be grouse shooting, pheasant shooting. We've come across it on the North Yorkshire Moors, Yorkshire Dales, in the South and North Pennines, the Scottish Borders, and recently in Shropshire, Northumberland, just to name a few, you know, a few of the areas we've been to. There seems to be an awful lot of, you know, land that is cultivated, if you like, for purposes of shooting. Now I actually went and had a look and found some figures out for the amount of land that it is, and now it was, yeah, it just baffles me. So there are 1.2 million hectares of land in the UK that's used for shooting. That's 4% of the whole land in the UK is given over to shooting. Now I know there is the counter argument that, well, you know, it's providing, you know, money for the economy of these rural areas, but actually when I looked into that, it's got the least economic value of any other land use type in the whole of the UK. So you just wonder, you know, there's this huge amount of land being used for the benefit of a very small number of people, and could some, or I don't know, a proportion of that land be used more effectively? Now it does seem to me that there might be a bit of a sea change happening. I was reading that in Scotland landowners now have to apply for licences for shooting, you know, which are bringing in more kind of strict regulations, you know, in terms of how the land is managed. And perhaps the most telling piece I found was one by the Countryside Alliance. They really are preparing themselves for a bit of a fight over changing laws in the UK with regard to grouse shooting. And I think particularly if there is a change of government, you know, I think those laws could bring in some, you know, quite sweeping changes, and perhaps mean that all of us get more access to the countryside than perhaps we have previously. So I think that's something that might be worth watching over the next few years, that actually we could soon be approaching a situation where we have very similar access laws in England and Wales perhaps to Scotland. And I mean, for me, I can only see the benefit of that. But those are my thoughts anyway. Yeah, and again, yeah, it's always nice to hear what other people think around the whole wild camping situation in England and Wales, what their own thoughts are, their own experiences are. And if you want to share those, you know, please drop me a comment. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what you've got to say and reply to it. But yeah, thank you for watching.